So it seems that some new rules have been shared around the internet for the Salamanders and the points cost for the Leagues of Votann. Let's talk about the small new updates to Vulkan, the Firestorm Assault Force, and some tantalising teasers of what might come, and talk through the Votann points with which of the new units are looking better or worse. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Space Marines and Votann with a look over some new digital rules. As I've talked about in a fair few videos over the past week, this week's had the Leagues of Votann and Vulkan go on sale. The Leagues of Votann have got their new codex, so we're expecting some digital updated points for them. The Salamanders was maybe a bit less certain, as we didn't know exactly how Games Workshop were treating their updated Space Marine rules and combat patrols, though I guess now we do. It looks like there's a new digital datasheet issued for Vulkan, a new small rewrite of the Firestorm Assault Force detachment to make it better for Salamanders specifically, and the detachment does have a new name as well. It's maybe a little unclear as to whether or not this is a replacement or a different way to fill the detachment, though I guess we'll find out in time. The changes aren't enormous, but it does make some meaningful ones. As is often the case for these updates, they're day one updates that Games Workshop have chosen to share with their approved content creators first, so the wider 40k community learns about these first in a sort of Chinese whispers effect, with most of these guys sharing a good chunk of the rules, though not all of them. So basically all the information is kind of secondhand from things like Sprues and Brews, Art of War and Goonhammer. Presumably they'll turn up as full rules downloads on Warhammer Community in time. Maybe around Wednesday the 20th of August might be the single most likely date, though it could be a bit before or after that. It does mean there's just a small chance there could be a few inaccuracies or things that have got lost in translation. Let's jump into the changes though, and maybe one of the more interesting details are the clarifications around the Space Marine rules updates. Recently Games Workshop announced their 5 new characters for the 5 non-Ultramarine core codex chapters that they tend to focus on. We knew that several of these will be getting digital update datasheets as they don't currently have rules in game, things like Sabodan Khan or the Iron Hands Terminator character. I wasn't sure whether or not they'd be updating Vulkan or Darnath Lysander though, given that they're existing characters with current rules. Both of their datasheets feel fairly impactful on the tabletop already. It seems that even these guys will be getting new digital download profiles though. The changes to Vulkan were kind of minimal, and if the Salamanders are anything to go by, it seems that each of the core codex chapters will get an updated detachment of one sort or another. It seems that the new one that's been shared around for the Salamanders is basically an updated Firestorm detachment, a few stratagems and options swapped out, though the majority of things stay the same. And I've just added on one bonus special rule which gives you a reward for taking the named character in that detachment. As best I can tell from all the reports, it doesn't immediately look like Games Workshop's made it obvious whether or not it's a replacement for Firestorm Assault Force or one that's supposed to be used as an alternative. If I had to guess, I'd probably guess that it will be a replacement. Given that the vast majority of the options and stratagems remain the same names, it might just be a little bit confusing. If you have 2 very similar detachments live at the same time, we won't know that until that's officially released for download though. If they just release the detachment without any errata for Codex Space Marines, I guess both of them will be legal. Should be interesting to see what we get for the other Space Marine characters though. Pretty interesting for the other named characters that don't have rules yet, and does mean that Lysander might get some changes. Jumping into the changes themselves though, let's talk about Vulkan's datasheet first. I talked about the Forgefather of the Salamanders earlier in the week with his quest to hunt down the relics of Vulkan. The majority of his datasheet is very similar. He still has a 2+ save and a 6+ feel no pain, and still gets his marker unit special rule to buff Melter and Torrent weapons against 1 focal target, and Seeker of Lost Relics to gain OC 10 and a 4+ feel no pain when standing on 1 nominated midfield objective. It seems that the changes for this guy being 1 buff and 1 nerf, the Gauntlet to the Forge isn't quite as punchy as it used to be. You now only have D6 attacks at Strength 6, AP 1, Damage 1, so basically that's about half as strong as it was before now. Previously it was D6 plus 3. It has gained the pistol keyword though, so if he's locked up in a protracted combat he could still fire it there. But I'd still probably rate that as overall a downgrade, as it was a bit more punchy before. Otherwise, he's got 1 small upgrade in Devastating Wounds on the Spear of Vulkan. That's still the same profile as it was before though. 6 attacks hitting on a 2+ at Strength 6, AP -2 and Damage 2. I have to admit, if I was adding extra keywords to that, I would have gone for the Lance keyword. They do seem to have quite commonly used that for other spears in the game. Between those, it doesn't really look like it's going to change him in any particularly meaningful way. His shooting was okay, but not so great that you take him just for that. And his melee got a bit better, but not crazily so. Otherwise, looks like it's confirmed he can still lead the exact same units as he could before, so I guess still Tactical Marines, Assault Intercessors, Infernus Marines and Company Heroes. All of those have at least some draw. Company Heroes could be quite a nice one to keep him safe while he marks targets though. Unless they change things in the balanced data slate, he'll still make Infernus Marines OC2. Though at the same time, if they were going to keep that around and issuing digital rules for him, it probably would have made sense to reprint that on this datasheet here, and reportedly that doesn't make an appearance on his datasheets. Finally, I'd presume that he'll be getting the Tacticus keyword, given that he's a Primaris Marine basically now. or at least at the scaling and the style of his backpack. I normally have not seen anywhere that's confirmed or denied whether or not he has the Tacticus keyword, though I strongly suspect that he would get it. In any case, no major changes there, no mention of his points having changed whatsoever, so presumably still at 100. Not really the most interesting update in the world, though I feel like as 10th edition rules go, his rules were already pretty fun and flavourful and fairly impactful at an army level, so no real reason to change those. Otherwise, for the new Salamander's detachment, this one's called the Forgefather Seekers, and it's basically a renamed version of the Firestorm Assault Force with a few small tweaks. The changes really aren't too massive. 2 stratagems get swapped out for something else, 1 enhancement gets swapped out for something else, and the detachment rule gets a bonus support for Infernus Marines if you're fielding Vulkan. It's certainly a potentially meaningful change for Space Marine players out there. The Firestorm Assault Force attachment has generally been a popular one for Codex Space Marines since it came out, certainly adding some meaningful rules with mobility of firepower and close range damage buffs, and it seems that currently it's the second most played detachment in more casual play. Throughout all of 10th edition though, it's never really been regarded as the single strongest one. Gladius, Ironstorm, Stormlance and Vanguard have generally tended to steal its thunder, perhaps Gladius and Stormlance the most at the moment, though it definitely has some interesting stuff and doesn't seem to stand out weak. It looks like it's pretty similar to the current overall Space Marine win rate average at the moment at grand tournaments, around 44%. Let's talk through the changes and updates for the Forgefather Seekers though. It's still very much themed around the Salamanders, though the stratagem changes make it not quite as focused on transports as it was. They swapped out 2 of the transport flavoured stratagems for some more general purpose ones. They've renamed the core detachment rule Vulkan's Quest, which is basically the same as close range eradication for the Firestorm, ranged weapons gain the assault keyword, and +1 to their strength within 12 inches. Both of those are some really quite helpful buffs, and particularly good for certain close range weapons. It really does synergise well with the Salamanders, Melter and Flamers that they like. Being able to advance and shoot is handy for any ranged weapons though, can be good for getting lines of sight for gunlight elements advancing. It's quite nice that the detachment now has some insurance against being locked up in close combat. For the additional special rule for the core rule though, it seems they've chosen to help out the Infernus Marines a little bit. The bonus rule is called Seeker's Companions, and this one only triggers if Vulkan Hestan is part of your army during your turn. This allows Infernus squads to both advance and do actions, and shoot while doing actions without causing that action to fail. Infernus Marines already get some solid buffs in this detachment. Being able to advance and shoot is really good for their close range profile, far more likely to get it in range, and the +1 strength means they're all the way up to strength 6, AP 1, damage 1. Fairly good for toasting infantry of all stripes, being still able to blaze away while doing actions like cleanse or investigate signal. Both of those are going to be useful, and particularly if they do still keep the OC2 that Vulkan has from the balanced data slate. It's not really what you call a very general purpose buff though. You need to both be playing Salamanders, want to take Vulkan Hestan, and want to take Infernus Marines. Certainly no problem whatsoever if you're playing fluffy, though it is putting lots of buffs on a unit that's generally considered kind of niche. Infernus Marines don't commonly get played outside of Vulkan and Firestorm. Before we move on to the rest of the detachment changes, I'll just give a quick shout out to Toy Snowman, the video sponsor. They have a gaming store based in Montreal, Canada, active since 2019, and sell Warhammer at 15% off Games Workshop prices. Their store's got plenty of the things that you'd normally expect with discount retailers for Warhammer 40k, a loyalty reward program, free shipping over $150 Canadian. Their website is pretty easy to search things up. If they happen not to have anything in stock from Games Workshop products, you can ask them to back order it on this email address. It looks like they've got good numbers of the weekend's releases in stock. If you're searching out Space Dwarves and Salamanders, both Vulkan Hestan and the Salamanders Combat Patrol are up for sale, as are all the new Votann kits. Doesn't look like anything is sold out yet, at least from my look. Feel free to check them out, links down in the video description if you'd like to pick anything up through them. And for other folks thinking of picking up any of the new releases, I'll also leave the channel's affiliate discount retailers linked in the video description below. A big thank you to anyone buying through those if they order stuff in. It does help to support Auspex Tactics. In any case though, a big thank you for that, and a big thank you to Toy Snowman for sponsoring the video. Returning to the Forgefather Seekers, as mentioned the majority of stratagems are the same as the Firestorm. There's still Armour of Contempt here, always a useful one, though as with other Space Marine detachments it only works against the one unit now. It seems that now the only transport one that remains is Burning Vengeance. That allows you to jump out of a transport and shoot at the enemy unit if the transport gets shot. Can be nice if you've got a bunch of Eradicators or Infernus Marines lurking inside a repulsor perhaps. Crucible of Battle still remains as a really nice 1-for-1 CP. You get a +1 to wound when shooting or fighting, presuming that you're attacking the closest eligible target within 6 inches. Very easy extra value there. They do have to get nice and close or engage in melee. You can still bring the devastating wounds with torrents with immolation protocols. That just gives torrent weapons devastating wounds for the units, though it does cost a big 2 CP. It's a bit painfully pricey unless you have a captain in the unit, but could still be worth it with either twin-linked Flamestorm aggressors or Infernus Marines with Vulkan Hestan's rerolls. In theory land at least you average something like 11 or 12 mortal wounds out of those with 4 rerolls and a full squad shooting. Added to those though, there's 2 new ones. They replace one for a +1 to hit when jumping out of a transport, and a 1 for re-embarking a transport at the end of the turn. It does skew the detachment further away from transport, presuming it's a replacement and not a side-by-side. You can take one or the other affair. The new stratagems are a 1 command point for Blazing Earth, and this one allows torrent weapons to debuff enemy charges. At the start of the enemy charge phase, you pick one of your units that has a torrent weapon in it, you nominate one enemy unit that the unit can see within 12 inches, and then -2 inches to charge this phase. It's handy enough for making mid-range charges annoyingly hard, but it is limited and you can't use it on monsters, vehicles or fly keyword units, and that does make it unusable on a bunch of very relevant targets. If you are being charged with infantry though at a fairly long range, it could well be worth it. If you really wanted to be heavily odds on to prevent a deep strike charge, you could use it there, but otherwise maybe could be worth it for anything that's sort of like a 6-inch charge or more. Turning a 6-inch into an 8-inch is a big decrease in the probability, or turning a 7 into a 9. It's going to be situational, but for the odd times where it does make the difference and prevent a charge, it is one of the ones that could be pretty game changing. The other one I think is a really big win for the detachment, and it's Wrathful Inferno. I think this was one of the main problems with the Firestorm Assault Force. It had a lot of shooting that encouraged you to get close and gave you the ability to move up close, but then unlike Gladius Task Force it wouldn't allow you to fall back and shoot, and now this one basically gives you that. 1 command point for your Space Marine units to still be able to shoot after it's fallen back for an infantry unit. That just seems a very directly helpful one to some of the units that the detachment encourages the most, particularly Infernus Marines and Eradicators. There's a good chance you might be doing your big damage combo and then the opponent just locks them up with some sort of sturdy chaff or a transport vehicle or something and makes them useless. Obviously it's not one that you want to be using every turn unless you had to, but it gives you some nice insurance and could potentially change the opponent's play as well. There might just be a lot less points doing nuisance charges with some sturdy chaff to hold up those units if they know that you can just fall back, shoot and do what you want anyway. I'd say if anything the access to that is maybe the single biggest buff to the detachment. Finally we've got the enhancements. 3 of them remain unchanged, 25 points for +3 strength to your infantry models' melee weapons, 20 points for Adamantine Mantle for a -1 damage for attacks made against the bearer. Melter and Torrent weapons go to flat 1 damage, and then probably the best of them was Forged in Battle that remains, which is 15 points and allows you to flip a hit roll or saving throw to an unmodified 6 after rolling. Just for added value in a unit that's very hard to go wrong with. You can use it in both your turn and the opponent's turn, so it basically means you have just that extra bit of reliable damage in your turn, and then basically use this to cancel a failed save in the enemy turn, and that pretty well 100% guarantees you that you save the life of a Space Marine, which is quite nice. Seems kind of auto-include if it's not awkward on the points and you've got units that are led by scary characters. The one that trades out, unfortunately, is Champions of Humanity, which was only 10 points for ignoring all modifiers for a unit, which was a seriously good value one. Again, with Forged in Battle, I would have rated those 2 as the 2 best, so kind of a shame to lose that one and not maybe either the Artifice or Mantle. In its place though is another one more focused on Flamecraft. This one's called Immolator, and this one gives you a +1 attack to torrent weapons from the bearer's unit. That makes the most relevant units for it the Flamestorm Gauntlets on the aggressors, or the Infernus Marines with their Pyroblasters, giving you d6 +1 attacks for them, or d6 +2 attacks for the Flamestorm Gauntlet aggressors. Both of those are pretty useful and meaningful buffs to the unit's damage output, around about an extra 28% damage for the Infernus Marines, 22 for the aggressors, and that will stack well with all the other damage buffs they can get in this detachment. +1 strength, advance and shoot, and Vulkan Hestan rerolls for the Infernus Marines. Overall seems pretty punchy. Maybe the only downside for the Infernus Marines is they don't really necessarily want or need a character alongside them. Most of the other Space Marine characters just don't do that much for them, so you might be buying one in as kind of a tax to unlock this. Maybe the aggressors are a bit more likely to want a character in the first place, maybe a Gravis captain that could discount the Devastating Wound stratagem if you wanted to. Overall seems interesting enough to me, and means that you could get those Devastating Wound stratagems to go further, or Vulkan Hestan's Infernus buff squad if it's a different squad with a leader, or if his rerolls to wound on those Strength 6 AP1 profiles are going to be landing a bunch more attacks. Overall, not really the biggest changes to the detachment once again, more of a nudge than a great big rules rewrite. I feel like the changes that they have made seem nice enough though. One more incentive to run Infernus Marines alongside Vulkan Hestan. The fallback and shoot stratagem is really nice to have. Blazing Earth is definitely situational, but occasionally it will matter really big, and that Immolator enhancement at least seems interesting. It is a shame that it replaced the Champions of Humanity one though, given that that was very usable and really popular, but overall feels like the detachment's fairly similarly strong as before. It's maybe not the worst idea if you're fielding a very Salamanders themed force, not to have half the stratagems locked to transport vehicles, which of course they do use but don't necessarily tend to be a theme of their chapter. Those are the Space Marine updates, but it seems that we also have some digital points costs for the Leagues of Votann too. Their codex is released recently and had some points costs in the back of it, but again it seems that Games Workshop send out their Mutator and Field manual early, and then people compile the points from various different videos and sources, so I've got a good idea as to what they're going to have. I'll probably focus more on the highlights than every single unit. I did talk through all the units in the codex review. The Hearthkin Warriors remain 100 points, and they gained a buff with a 5+ invulnerable save granted by the Thane's Crest, so if you're splitting the unit in half, it'd just be for his 5-man squad. Not a bad thing for them though. The Hernkin Jaegers remain unchanged, as do the Chthonian Berserks. The Berserks look kind of interesting given their big damage profiles with the anti-keywords, though are a little easier to kill now. The Einir Hearthguard did take some datasheet nerfs, dropping down to toughness 5 with no inbuilt -1 to wounds. They will quite enjoy the +1 shot to their plasma guns though. That loadout's looking seriously punchy. It does seem they've dropped down to 135 points as was printed in the codex, and overall I still think that they look like a really quite interesting unit. Where I've seen them discussed though, I feel like the disappointment with them is that they just don't really feel too much like Votann mini Terminators, which is what they look like, and if anything they feel like they're a unit that's got even more tilted to range more so than melee. The Ironkin Steeljack seem to have both squads at 90 points or 180. For the codex printed ones, the ranged variant was cheaper and the melee variant was more expensive, which did seem kind of weird to me as the melee ones didn't look notably better. Feels like the same cost is pretty appropriate for them, though I'm still a bit apprehensive as to how efficient they're going to be at that kind of points cost. They seem alright, and I guess they're the most durable Votann infantry now. I think I would have wanted to see a points cost less than 30 though. Perhaps the biggest winners out of the infantry datasheets seem like the Brockir Thunderkin. The codex implies that they might be going up to 85 points for 3 of them, but it still seems that their digital points are 80, and that feels pretty massive given just how much damage they can do. Both the Grav Cannons and the Conversion Beamers look seriously scary. At 80 points for 3, I'd be surprised if we don't see loads of lists that have 3 units of them in. There was less good news for the Chthonian Earthshakers though. Seems that their indirect fire puts them at a big premium and they go up to 110. I'm not sure they would have been particularly exciting at 95 points at first impressions, though to be honest I wasn't really expecting any sort of artillery fire to be standout great in 10th edition. On the vehicle front, both the Capricus Carrier and Capricus Defender are as printed, 70 points per Defender and 75 points for the Carrier. They seem like they're okay medium durable skirmish units for that value. The Land Fortress seems to have increased to 240 from 225, though again doesn't really necessarily seem like the worst news in the world for that. Its rail cannon got upgunned with 2 shots rather than 1, which I think was a big win, plus the other weapons got bonuses of one sort or another. Still seems like they're going to be a good unit. Maybe the biggest loser seems to have been the Sagittor though. It looks like that's still going to be 115 points. That was printed at 95 points in the codex, which I thought was kind of lightly given the nerfs it seems to have taken. Its main gun got less threatening, it doesn't have scouts anymore and lost a pip of toughness. If it really does finally wind up at 115 points, I feel like Sagittor spam lists aren't going to be quite as much of a thing. Still seems that it'll have value though for splitting Hearthkin squads and transporting Berserks into battle. Finally for the characters, for the 3 new ones, the Memnir Strategist and Buri Aignason are both as printed. Both of those seem efficient. Buri is pretty tough to kill and punchy. The Memnir seems valuable for 45 points for manipulating yield points when camped on the home field objective. Seems the Arcanist Evaluator is a little more expensive though. It appears that he's 75 points when he was printed at 65 and feels quite a lot more borderline for that cost. He does have a punchy gun, but it's just incredibly fragile if the opponent manages to catch up with him, and he might potentially have only 1 wound remaining if he does take a hazardous roll. The Carl and the Grimnir are 70 points and 65 points respectively. Maybe not the best news for the Grimnir getting relevant. I guess the Carl could be a bit more interesting with getting lethal hits on those plasma guns for the Hearthguard. And then the other 3 seem to have gone up a bit. The Ironhair Champion going up 10, though he did gain some extra AP and a +1 to charges. It could make him just a little bit more reliable at delivering Ironhair Hearthguards to combat out of Deep Strike. The Brockhair Ironmaster goes up 10. He can be a lone operative now, which seems kind of good. Plus his personal damage got better against monsters too. And finally Uthar the Destined seems to have gone up to 95 points. His core model maybe isn't the most exciting in the world, though he does have a very good command point manipulation mechanic. Discounted stratagems within 12 inches is a big deal for Votann, and is really the only command point manipulation in the book of that sort of nature. Feels like he could still be potentially worth it, hold up with a Hearthkin squad on a home objective, affecting units nearby with 3 stratagems, and then making a late game push to get his melee profile to bring to bear. Overall, maybe only a few surprises compared with the codex and the printed points cost there. If those do wind up being the final points cost, then I feel like the biggest winner are the Brockheath Thunderkin. They might be a bit less durable, but they can hit just incredibly hard now. Feels like they could be one of the more standout data sheets in the codex. The Land Fortress still seems good, and I feel like with the discounted points, the Iron Hair Hearthguard might still be strong. The data sheet did have a lot of changes though. Maybe for the biggest losers of this one, if the Sagittor does remain 115 points, that's not great. The Steeljacks initially feel a bit mid at 180 points for 6 of them, and the Chthonian Earthshakers seem too expensive at 110 points. Obviously it's all a bit of theory crafting at the moment, and I'll certainly be interested to take a look at what sort of things come out on top when people start to put things on the board. In any case though, let me know your thoughts as to 40k's rules updates down in the comments below. What do you make of the new Space Marine changes and the Votann? I look forward to hearing your thoughts as always. If you are looking to pick up any of the new releases, then feel free to check out the channel's affiliate discount retailers, links down in the video description. And also check out Toy Snowman, the video sponsor, if you're over in Canada. They have 15% off Games Workshop's prices and have most of the new releases still in stock. I'll leave that there for now though. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. You can find that linked in the video description. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case though, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.